we could start?
Yes, good.
If you may hear.
Inshallah.
Welcome, and thanks to everyone who has joined me from all over the world for Chai with Munni. This is our third episode and one very close to my heart. What is Sufism? I was so happy to see the interest in this subject as we received many questions for our guest to answer them. We have today a very special guest with us, Manny Levine, who we know and love by his Sufi name, which is Musa Muhaiyaddeen. It is my privilege to introduce everyone to Musa Muhaiyaddeen. Manny, or my brother Musa, is the senior president of Baba Muhaiyaddeen Fellowship based in Philadelphia. Baba Muhaiyaddeen was a Sufi kutub, in other words, a pole or anchor among Sufis worldwide during his time. Baba came to America in the 1970s. In Philadelphia, Baba settled and made his home, built a mosque, and spread the Sufi message of Islam among the Americans. Baba's tomb is outside of Philadelphia, which is visited by hundreds of Americans who met him during his lifetime, or heard about him, and came to respect and love him. Musa was one of the earliest members of Baba's fellowship, and in the very special relationship between a Sufi peer or master and murid or devoted student. Musa Muhaiyaddeen is a spiritual child of Baba. By profession, he is a lawyer and businessman, but he has devoted most of his time and energy in the worldwide work of the Baba Muhaiyaddeen Fellowship. He's a writer, a public speaker, a scholar of Sufism, a pilgrim to Mecca, and as a devout Sufi, always generous to share his wisdom and experience with everyone who wishes to learn about Sufism. Musa is married to Arshia and has three wonderful children and six beautiful grandchildren. Surely you would love to know more about Musa after hearing him if it's your first time. So there are a few sites you might want to visit. Musa's original English books are translated in Spanish, Arabic, and Turkish. Elixir, volumes 1 and 2, and Sufi Illuminations are all available on Amazon and Kindle. He also has a YouTube channel titled Musa Muhaiyaddeen. He has a podcast on Buzzsprout under the title The Witness Within. He has traveled around the world speaking on Sufism. Countries include US, Canada, Africa, Europe, and Asia. I am humbled once again by this immense and heartfelt privilege to welcome our honored guest, Musa Muhaiyaddeen.
Good morning, everybody. Salam alaikum. And I think we'll begin the way we begin our meetings that we do on Mondays, on Wednesdays, and Saturdays by doing the Fatiha and some calls. A'udhu billahi minash shaitani rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdina siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Amin. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad. Allahu samad. lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul a'udhu birabbil falaq min sharri ma khalaq wa min sharri ghasikin idha waqab wa min sharri nafathati fil uqad wa min sharri hasidin idha hasad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Qul a'udhu birabbin nas malikin nas ilahin nas min sharril waswasil khannas alladhi yuwaswisu fi sudurin nas min al-jannati wa nas. Amin, amin, ya rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam, Musa.
Munni,
So, yes, there are many, many questions that
go ahead.
came, and there's one that Musa wanted to start off with. What was it that brought you to Sufism? Second one, most religion ease of pain. How does Sufism help you transcend your pain? And there's another one. How do you see religions growing in the future? Is Sufism a new direction as it's very internal and not as much external? Thank you, Musa.
All right, let's begin by talking about the individual journey. And people often want to know, how did I end up in Sufism? How did it come about that I found this path? What was it that triggered my interest? Well, for most people, we are brought up in a certain way, and we accept what we're told when we're young. We tend to follow what we're given. And for many of us, the world, especially in America, has a very powerful influence on us. There's so much of the world in this country, and there's so much available to us by way of material things, by way of educational opportunities, by way of almost anything that we can think of, we can find within the manifest reality of this world, within the elemental reality of this world. However, things happen in life, things that shock you into a realization that there is more to existence than just that which is materially manifest. There is more to existence than what meets the eye. There's more to existence than what our senses can perceive and understand. There is an unknown element in existence that is beyond our comprehension, that as hard as we may intend to know it, it seems to escape us. And these mysteries, depending on our own individual nature and our own individual circumstances, sometimes become much more important to us than everything else that we encounter in the world. For me, when I was approximately 21 years old, I was put into a situation where the United States was in the midst of a conflict, and lots of people my age at that time were being drafted into that conflict, being made to go to war, and many of my friends were dying. And this made me ask some very important questions at that time. I saw that my future was laid out before me, not by myself, but by forces that were greater than me. And I was going to be pushed and pulled into situations that I didn't necessarily want to be in. So I began asking questions like, why am I here? What is the purpose of this existence? Why were we put on this earth? What is life about? I began to read where I was living in Boston at the time, going to law school. I began to read various books on the subject. I began to read books on Buddhism, books on Hinduism, books on Christianity, books on Judaism, books on Islam. And I ran across some books on Sufism. I was able to make arrangements to stay out of the war because there were certain exemptions given for certain jobs, one of which was to teach in certain underprivileged areas. And I was able to find work in such an area. Now, entering onto the Sufi path isn't just your own idea, and it takes more than your intention for it to occur. A lot of things have to occur simultaneously to buttress your intention so that your intention has fruition. It just so happened that after I graduated law school, I came to a small town in the Philadelphia area. And it also just so happened that a Sufi master came to live in Philadelphia, and his name was Muhammad Rahim Bao Muhaiyaddeen. And I was told about his arrival, and I went to see him. In my encounter with him, I found some things that showed me that I was within the presence of something extraordinary. I had known through most of my life, as I was old enough to realize, that most people who I spoke to didn't know what they were talking about, which didn't stop them from speaking. They would all give you advice and tell you how things were going, but they really didn't know. They had a grasp, but they didn't know. When I sat in front of Bawa for the first time, I was with somebody I felt had an idea of what was going on. And I devoted my attention to what he had to say. And some extraordinary things happened within the encounter. I had certain questions that I wanted to ask him at that first meeting. And I never got around to asking them because I was stunned by his presence. But nonetheless, even though I didn't ask the questions, he answered them without me becoming involved in asking them. And this kind of phenomenon, this kind of extraordinary interrelationship continued between he and I until such time as he passed in 1986. I met him in March of 1972, and I became a regular attendee of his sessions at that time. Eventually, he asked me to move to Philadelphia from where I was, and I moved within approximately 1.9 miles of his residence, and was able to be at the fellowship house with him quite often. During the time I was with him, he asked me to do certain things for him on his behalf, and I continue to do things for him on his behalf. Eventually, I became the president of the Muhaiyaddeen Fellowship, which is the organization that takes on the responsibility of conveying his teachings to the world. As you can tell from that short intro, a teacher was put in my path. One of the things that I read when I was in my reading pre-meeting a teacher phase was that when you're ready for a teacher will appear for you. In other words, they know you're out there and they come and bring you to them. And I was brought. In the beginning, when I was first with him, I didn't quite know or understand what he was talking about. But I realized that what he was telling me was the truth, and that even though I couldn't understand what was going on, I had to listen and I had to take in what was being said. And God willing, in time, I would begin to understand what he was talking about. So people ask, and as that question that was just put forth is, what does Sufism do to help you with the pain of this world? What does Sufism do to help you alleviate your struggle within the world? And how does it bring you to a point of being content? Well, a large part of the understanding within Sufism is that this world is illusory. It's not real. It's not permanent. It's not eternal. It's a temporary manifestation. You're here for a certain period of time, and then this body disappears. So why do we take it so seriously? Why do we treat our interaction with the elemental world, our interaction with the world that we live in, as if it's the most important thing in our lives? Well, the reason is because it's all we know until we know more. And since it's all we know, we give it great importance. What the sheikh does, what the teacher does, is bring into your cognizance the understanding that this world that you give so much importance to, that you give so much credence to, that you hold up so high, is a very tiny thing, smaller than an atom. But it becomes big because you give it importance. So the teacher begins to shift within you what you give importance to. The teacher begins to shift within you what you understand is reality. Now, in Islam, in Sufism, there are 99 names for God, for Allah. One of them is Haq. Haq means reality. Hakikat is the path of reality. Sufism is the path of reality. To take you from your life in illusion, to take you to a life in reality. And as your life shifts from illusion to reality, certain things happen to you as an individual. The things that caused you problems, the things that caused you pain, the things that make life difficult for you are your attachment to illusion, your attachment to this world, your attachment to the things in this world, and your attachment to what you think you can gain in this world. Praise, wealth, fame. Once it's understood that these are small things of very little consequence and of very little importance, you begin to understand what is truly important. My teacher, Muhammad Rahim Bao Muhaiyaddeen, used to refer to himself as the Ant-Man, the smallest and most discarded of Allah's creations. In other words, he was making the point that within the world, he was very tiny, very small. All of us should understand that within this world, we are very tiny. We are very small. And that there is another way that we can travel that is beyond this physical world. That there is another way of perception. There is a perception beyond which our senses perceive. There is an entire unknown, unseen world that can become known if we learn to understand the unseen, if we learn to understand the non-manifest, if we learn to understand formlessness and what exists within formlessness. For instance, we've all had experience with love. As a child, the love between a mother and child is an extraordinary thing. And a child who's raised without a mother's love will have tremendous problems as an adult because they've never had that kindness that love conveys, and it leaves them with an emptiness as they grow up. Love can't be seen. It can't be measured. It can't be weighed. It isn't within the realm of examination the way scientists examine things. Yet we all know how powerful it is. Mercy is one of the names of Allah. Compassion is one of the names of Allah. Every time we begin an endeavor, we are taught to say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate. Mercy and compassion are formless, yet their power is immense. Their effect is immense. What they can do between ourselves and others is immense. One of the things that we learned being in the presence of the Sheikh is that he had an enormous capacity to convey love and to be in the presence of the resonance of that love was life altering. It became, to me and to many others, more important to sit in front of the sheikh and be in the presence of the resonance of his love than any other thing in the world. Nothing was able to convey the kind of energy, the kind of satisfaction that being in that position gave to us. All of a sudden, it became more important than the worldly entertainment. It became more important than being involved in the worldly games of conspicuous consumption. It was more important than having a new car. It was more important than having a big house. It was more important than all of the various satisfactions that you get from the world. All of a sudden, we began to understand that all of these physical rewards that the world gives you doesn't equate to what can happen to you within a second of being within the resonance of overwhelming love. And so this transition happens. This transition from being involved with the world to being involved with the formless, to being involved with that which is eternal, as opposed to being involved with that which is temporary. And when that happens, many of the problems of the world fall away from you, because love soothes them and shows you the reality of them. It's asked, how do you make your Lord content with you? How do you get to a place where God is content with you? And one of the answers that the ancients have given us is, when you are content with your Lord will be content with you. So one of the major works that we have to do individually is become content with our situation. We have to be content with what we have, and we have to be content with what we don't have. The one who is content doesn't worry about what he doesn't have and is satisfied with whatever he does have. These are incredibly important things to learn. The world may tell you that there is no end to need. There is no end to accumulation. There is no end to wealth or fame. And if you take on that mindset, you're never satisfied. You never get to the point where you have enough money. And when you begin to think, how come I'm not satisfied? How come I haven't gotten to a place of peace? Satan comes along and tells you it's because you don't have enough. If you only had more money, if you only had more fame, you would reach that point of contentment. And this is the big lie that the world gives you, that the world is capable of making you content. The world is not capable of making you content. The only thing that is going to bring you to a state of contentment is to understand that which is beyond manifestation. That is that which is beyond the elemental forms, beyond that we sense with our senses. When we can begin to focus our life on Allah's qualities, on mercy, compassion, love, kindness, justice, truth, when we begin to incorporate those qualities into our being, then the difficulties of the world dissipate from us, have no effect on us, and we can find truth, we can find joy, and we can find majesty by being that with that which is paternal. Munni, do you have another question?
Yeah, but all that you have said, it's so fulfilling. This is from Sushital Chaudhary. He is the president of Durga Bari Temple. It's a temple, and he says, does Sufism accommodate other ways of life or other religions? I believe religions for us, we are not for religion. Humanism is the best religion, where gods of any format or ways have to be happy. Is it true? Those who serve others serve Lord, as per Swami Vivekananda. Does Sufism agree on that?
Okay. As you can tell, Sufism is an internal path, and it's a path of finding reality. And this reality is beyond what you can encounter with the senses. Since it's beyond what you can encounter with the senses, the manifest world is not the answer to the question. The answer to the question is, do you believe in a higher being? Do you believe in God? And Sufism believes in all the prophets. By believing in all the prophets, of course, it believes in all of the religions. All of the religions are stacked, and all of the religions lead towards the truth. Sufism, for the most part, has taken on the cloak of Islam, which means that in its language and in its rituals, it is involved with Islamic ways. However, there are Sufi groups who are non-Islamic. There are Sufi groups who are within other religions. And I can give you examples, although it's not necessary, of other religions who have Sufi orders within them, believe it or not. The point of Sufism is that we create an internal connection between ourselves and our Lord. However, this internal connection that we create is not exclusionary. Sufism preaches a unity of existence. We are all born of one mother and father. There is one God, and this God is within all of us. So, whatever religion you practice, the truth of the fact that this world is temporary and that there is a non-elemental world beyond this is true. God is light. Light is truth. We go from this body to light. If we are going to progress towards our eventual appropriate culmination of this life, we go into the next phase of existence, which is to become light. There is no difference between life and death. We just think there is a difference. It's a natural path. But as long as we have desire, we want to hold on to this life and to this relationship that we have with the manifest world. It's all that we know. And we have fallen in love with it. And we don't want to let go of it. But if we begin to understand truth, if we have a teacher who shows us that there is a way that is beyond this manifest world, and that there is a way beyond differences within people, differences within religion, differences between opinions, that there's a unity in all of existence. When we begin to understand that, when we begin to learn that, we become different. God has no separations. God sees all of us and is within all of us. Who are we to separate ourselves into castes, into religions, into differences? Bawa called this need that people have to segregate themselves from others the sin of separation. And we need to go beyond separations and involve ourselves in unity. That doesn't mean we should leave our path or the way that we have been taught to do things. But it also means that we should allow other people to do things the way that they do things. The Quran says there is no coercion in religion. And that means two things. One, you shouldn't try to coerce people to go in a certain way. And two, you can't. You can't make people believe the way you want them to believe. They'll only do that on their own. So I agree with most of the statement. Sometimes the word humanism means without God. I am totally with a methodology that holds God as the head of everything, as the one creator who made all of this. But all of us, no matter which way we devote ourselves to him, can move into that path, into that direction. Okay. Munni, next question.
Sure, the person who asked the questions, Sushital, got a lot of info from that. This is a from Israel, and the sender is Florie. She says, as I love Sufi songs and would love to know more about Sufism, my question would be as follows. What is the primary objective of Sufism, and which is the most important belief in Sufism?
Well, you know, I studied with a sheikh for 12 years. During that time, I listened to hundreds, maybe thousands of talks. Sufism is not an intellectual pursuit. Sufism isn't like a test that you take in high school or in college or in university, wherein the teacher asks you a question and you write down what you read in the book as an answer to the question. It is said that Sufism used to be a state of being without a name, and now it's a name without a state of being. The point is that Sufism is about becoming a certain way, about entering into a certain state of being, a state of being that is detached from this elemental world and is attaching itself to that which is eternal, that which is God's world, through an understanding of his qualities and through an understanding of becoming like him. There was a famous Sufi in the 12th century whose name was Halaj, who said, Anal Haq, which means I am reality. And for saying this publicly, he was killed by the government at the time because this was considered heresy. But what was he in fact saying? He was saying God is in everything and God is everywhere. And I am also one of those who God is within. And if we truly understand and we acknowledge that God is within everything and God is everywhere, then we can begin to understand the commonality of mankind, the unity of mankind, the understanding that we are all on the same path. We are all going to the same places. It's been described often as a wheel with many spokes, and all the spokes lead to the same place. So the path involves knowledge, but it also involves action, and it involves becoming. We have to become compassion. We have to become truth. We have to become justice. We have to become real. So we have to change this life wherein we lead an imitation of reality through our involvement with the manifest world, with the physical world, and we have to enter into a world with that which is eternal. And that which is eternal are Allah's qualities, Allah's way, Allah's realities. And those qualities are available to man. That reality is available to man. So Sufism is a path of becoming. It's a path of entering into states that are other than our connection with our senses and our connection to this physical world. It's beginning to be able to understand the unseen. It's beginning to be able to understand what is not visible to our eyes, what is not visible to our physical senses. We have to develop senses beyond the physical. We have to become sensitive to the unseen, sensitive to the fact that Allah, God, is within everything around us, and we have to become sensitive to that. A true Sufi will feel the pain of those around him, will feel the joy of those around him, will not feel separate from those around him. In Sufism, a true man is described as an insan kamil, someone who has become truly human, as opposed to an animal with a human form. So we could say that part of this path is to give up our animal characteristics, our animal qualities, and assume godly characteristics and godly qualities. To do this, we have to give up our attachment to the physical. We have to give up desire. Desire is what separates us from knowing the truth. Desire attaches us to the physical world. Once desire begins to erupt within us, lust develops. And when lust develops, we enter into a state of need. And then we spend our life trying to fulfill that need. The truth is that those needs can't be fulfilled because there is no ultimate satisfaction in any of those needs. So we have to give up those worldly lusts and those worldly desires, and we have to create a new desire for knowledge of God and interaction with God. All of the desires that we have within the world have no cure, but the desire to know God, the desire to become real, the desire to transcend this physical plane and understand truth has a cure, because Allah is the cure for everything. Allah is the satisfaction for everything. Allah is the contentment for everything. So we need to understand that, and we need to put ourselves into the situation where that becomes our intention. Intention is very important. You help create who you will become through your intention. And as long as you intend things within the physical world, as long as you intend accumulation of things within this physical world, as long as you intend the qualities of this physical world, you will create veils between yourself and reality. And to do away with these veils, you have to give up those intentions. You have to give up those desires. You have to give up the lust for those things. And if we don't, then we preclude ourselves from entering into the truth. We do it to ourselves by our own intentions. So we have to be very careful what we intend. We have to be very careful in understanding what it is that we want. We have to be very careful in setting up our priorities. And all of this is learned over time through the guidance of the teacher. All of this is learned through watching the teacher. The teacher says to us, become like me. Well, what is he like? What was he like? What did he do? And what did we see when we are in his presence? We saw that he treated all men equally, that he loved all men equally, that he made no distinctions, whether you knew him for an extended period of time or just met him. Can we be towards the rest of humanity that way? These are some of the things that are at the crux of the Sufistic understanding of things. Okay, Munni?
Thanks. This could be a very relevant question to what you just explained. This is from Saiful Kareem, all the way from Dhaka, Bangladesh. He says Sufism and Saintism has become commercial. How do we find the real person?
Well, Sufism isn't meant to be commercial. There was nothing about our experience with our sheikh that involved money. He didn't charge for anything. If he was going to go to a place that invited him, if they were charging money for admission, he wouldn't go. The point is that if money is involved in this transaction of truth, you should be put on notice that this is not the transaction you should be involved in. You need to find teachers who are teaching for the sake of God, not for the sake of their financial embetterment. So we were taught that you can't sell the truth, just as you can't buy the truth. Either the truth resides within you and is grown within you, or it isn't, but you can't buy it or sell it. It's like the time within the Catholic Church when they used to sell dispensations. If you gave a certain amount of money, you were guaranteed a place in heaven. They eventually gave up this practice. But the point is, it's not about money. It's not about commercialism. It's about truth. And money is not what God barters with. Money is not a currency that God deals with. God deals with your heart and the changing of your heart and the truth in your heart. So if you're running into people who are asking you to give them money in order to give you some kind of understanding, go find somebody else.
That was easy.
Yeah.
Thank you. You did talk about the Anal Haq. Maybe this could be relevant to that. And this is from Nafees from London, UK. She says Sufism believes in paying homage to and worshipping dargahs. And she says, whereas in Islam, we are allowed only to worship Allah. And what is your take on this?
Well, there was a man who was trying to teach a parrot to talk. And as long as he was sitting in front of the parrot would take no direction from him. And he couldn't teach the parrot anything. So he brought a mirror and put the mirror in front of the parrot and spoke to the parrot from behind the mirror. All of a sudden, the parrot thought a parrot was talking to him and began to pay some attention and began to learn from the mirror or the parrot and began to talk. Likewise, Allah has sent us manifestations that come into our purview that tell us the truth. Manifestations in the form of men who we can relate to and we can understand. When the Prophet passed, there was a great eruption. And Abu Bakr said, do you believe that the Prophet has passed? Or do you believe the Prophet is eternal? Do we still do salawat to the Prophet? Do we still do praise to the Prophet? Do we still ask grace upon the Prophet? Why? Well, in this world, there are ketubs, and they are considered the axis between heaven and earth. And they are at certain levels of consciousness. When they leave this world and return to the light, light carries consciousness. Can we be thankful to that consciousness that changed us, that did something on our behalf? Isn't everything Allah? Isn't all that we see Allah? Don't we say, La ilaha illallah, nothing exists but Allah, and I, in fact, don't exist. With this understanding, shouldn't we also be thankful for all of the messengers that he sent to us that helped us to achieve the path towards reality? Is there something wrong with this kind of gratitude? as long as we understand the finality of the fact that only God exists. There's a story of Moses who saw a man praying to an idol. And he went up to the man and berated him for this worshiping that he was doing to the idol. This is an old Sufi story. And he said to him, "How can you pray to this piece of stone when in truth there is but one formless God?" And after he was finished and Moses left, Allah came to Moses and said, "This man had devotion, and his devotion was moving forward. It was transcending. Now he was at the state of devotion to a stone, but eventually his devotion would come closer to the truth." We should not try to break people's devotion. We should enhance their devotion. We should enhance their path towards reality. And we have to understand that not everybody is on the same step in this path, and different people need to be taught different things over time. When the Prophet was in Mecca, prayer had not yet been brought into the equation. It hadn't been brought until he went to Medina. A lot of these people passed or were martyred while they were in Mecca. Does that mean because they didn't pray, they didn't deserve reward? These are all questions we have to ask ourselves, and we have to put ourselves in an understanding that all men are moving towards the truth, and what we should do is aid them towards the truth, not try to berate them or to punish them or to somehow push them in a way that they can't be helped. Our point is to love and be kind, and through loving, people will understand love and people will understand truth. But through harshness and through hard and fast rules, it's very difficult to convey love. Okay, Munni.
Beautiful question again here. Very simple one. What is the difference between Wahhabism and Sufism from a person who's very confused, who is from a Hindu background and his name is Tomal? So he says, I'm always confused where to go. So,
Well, there's very many different Sufi tarikats, which means Sufi ways, and there's different ways that Wahhabism is interpreted. But let's just try and give some examples. Wahhabism was named after a man whose name was Ibn Wahhab, who sometime in the 1700s lived in what's now Saudi Arabia. And he was the son of an imam who was sent to Cairo, Baghdad, and Damascus to be trained. And when he returned, he had a real disgust with colonialism and a real problem with the fact that much of the Arab world at the time was under control of others. So he began to preach that Islam had a sixth pillar, and that sixth pillar was jihad, which meant that you had to do away with all of the influences that were other than his understanding of Islam. So Wahhabism has a warlike component within it. Sufism doesn't. Sufism believes that you make headway through kindness and through love. Wahhabism has more force in it. Wahhabism has been anti-Sufistic. If you go into Saudi Arabia and you are carrying Sufi books in the past, they would be taken from you. If you preach Sufi ideas, you could get yourself into a lot of trouble. There is a very, very strict set of rules within Wahhabism, whereas Sufism is a much more moderate, tolerant approach to man and man's relationship with God. There's more patience in Sufism. There's more tolerance in Sufism. There's more kindness in Sufism. Sufism prior to Ibn Wahhab had a great adherence in the Islamic world. Wahhabism began to alter that by bringing money into various parts of the world and setting up madrasas, schools that taught this severe kind of Islam. Those are the main differences. Sufism is not severe. Sufism is kind and tolerant and forgiving. I think that's enough.
That says a lot. That says a lot. So here's a question from Afsan, and he wants to know, so what is the relationship Sufism has with the Quran, Sunnah, and Sharia?
The Sufism, as I said before, takes on different cloaks in this world. There are many interpretations about where Sufism came from. Some say that Sufism came directly from the Prophet. Others say that Sufism has been around since the beginning of humanity. However, Sufism believes in the Quran, believes in Shariat, and believes in the Sunnah, and follows the Quran, the Shariat, and the Sunnah. And in true Sufism, there should be no deviation from these things. There may be different interpretations, as there would be with, say, a Wahhabi interpretation of the Quran and a Sufi interpretation of the Quran. But the Sufism does not contradict Shariat and does not contradict the Quran and does not contradict Sunnah. Okay?
Yeah, next question. I believe 5-time prayers and such obligatory essentials are not deemed necessary among Sufi practices.
It depends on the Sufi order that you're involved in, but essentially 5 times prayer is part of the Sufi way. If you go to Turkey and you see Rumi's tomb and Rumi's dargah, and I assume you all know about Rumi, there's also attached to that tomb a mosque where 5 times prayer is done. In our fellowship house in Philadelphia, Eventually, we built a mosque adjacent to the fellowship house where Bawa spoke, and Bawa directed people to do the 5 times prayer. So I would not say that all Sufis don't do 5 times prayer. There are probably some sects who don't, but it's certainly part of the ancient tradition of Sufism to be involved with the rules of Shariat and the rules of prayer. Now, there are stories about Shams, for instance, and Rumi, his student, and how Shams tried to show Rumi that there was more than the strict abidance of the law. There was more than just doing everything that has been written down as your duty. There was the opening of the heart and the becoming transcendent into the realm of the formless. And this is what Rumi wrote about. The Quran and the Shariat and the Sunnah are all part of this, but there's also deeper and deeper understandings, and these could be called interpretations. And the Sufis try to take you to the depth of these understandings. Okay.
Are you tired?
No,
So, we are enjoying, and so is everyone, So this question is from Hassan Mahmood. He's written books and has done documentary too. My question, what is the Sufi approach to the theory of creating political Islamic state based on Sharia law? Also, how Sufism addresses the issue of capturing political power to create Islamic state? What is the effect of such effort on world Muslims?
Sufism tries to stay away from political power. There's a story of a king who was in heaven and a dervish who was in hell. And someone asked, why these two things? And the answer was that the dervish during his lifetime gave homage to the kings, and the king during his lifetime gave homage to the Sufis, to the dervishes. Muhammad once was asked, what is one of the greatest signs of devotion to God? And the Prophet said, peace and blessings be upon him, that to tell a ruler the truth shows your devotion to reality. Political Islam and the attempt to shape the world in a certain way does away with the understanding that you can't shape humanity externally. Humanity gets shaped internally, one person at a time. And all of these movements that try to shape large swaths of humanity are, in fact, not going to accomplish what they think they're going to accomplish. There is no coercion in religion. There is no way that you can force humanity to take on a certain mode and a certain shape. Humanity is changed not by the wave of a hand, but by immense work with individuals, by immense work with the heart of individuals, by one-on-one relationships. And this doesn't lead to great political movements. There's too much to be done in small settings. And the ambition that is involved in political power is an anathema to a Sufi's way of being. That kind of ambition is not what he's looking for. He's not looking to control the world. He's looking to create a relationship with Allah. A lot of these movements that are going on right now to try and make major changes have a basis in Marxist thought and Marxist ideologies, which believed that you can change people and you should try to create governments that change people. All of these have been proven to cause extreme difficulty. Look at some of these movements. Look at what ISIS has done in their attempt to create an Islamic society. Incredible amounts of murder were done in the name of Allah. Incredible difficulty has been given to people in the name of Allah. Sufis try to change hearts, not governments. Sufis try to change attitudes, not create ruling classes. Sufis try to find reality with God, not reality in this world. And this is a major understanding within Sufism, that the work that they do is to advise. They don't rule, and they don't need to rule. Okay, I think I answered that question.
Wonderful. Of course you did. But of course you could go on and on. I know that. So this question was asked by two people. So it's the same question about the whirling dervish. What?
Okay, let's talk about that. For anybody who's been to Turkey, they've spent a little bit of time there as a tourist and gone to touristic places, there's a good chance that you saw whirling dervishes, because whirling dervishes have become a form of Turkish entertainment for the masses. But there's a very interesting story that goes back to the time of the Prophet that talks about the first Sema. Sema is the name that's given for whirling. And I'll tell you that story. The Prophet asked for charity. And this story is, by the way, is related by Umar. And Umar said, he came forward and said, I will give half of everything that I have. And the Prophet accepted that. And then Abu Bakr came forward. And Umar relates that, that Abu Bakr said, I give everything that I have. And the Prophet then asked Abu Bakr, how will you support yourself and your family? And Abu Bakr said, I will rely on the grace of my Prophet and my Lord for my support. A few days went by after this happened, and Abu Bakr wasn't seen in the company of the Prophet. And Abu Bakr was nowhere to be found. And the Prophet wanted to know where he was. So he sent someone in his entourage to bring back Abu Bakr and find out where he was and why he hasn't shown up. So this person went to Abu Bakr's house, knocked on the door, and said, you haven't been in the company of the Prophet, and the Prophet is asking for you. Why aren't you around? And Abu Bakr responded, when I said I would give everything I have, that's what I did. And all I'm left with is a small piece of cloth to cover me during prayers and a small piece of cloth for my wife. to cover herself through prayers. And then the man said, well, the prophet has asked that you come see him immediately, so figure something out and get there. So Abu Bakr went into his backyard, and there were some palm trees, and he created a skirt made out of palm fronds. A palm frond is the big leaf on a palm tree, and began his walk to where the prophet was after he made this skirt of these palm leaves. While Abu Bakr was on his way to the prophet, Gabriel came to see the prophet. And Gabriel said to the prophet, I have a message for you to give Abu Bakr. And the message is that if Abu Bakr is content with his Lord is content with him. And the prophet said, of course, I will give Abu Bakr this message. And the prophet then said to Gabriel, why are you wearing a skirt made out of palm fronds, out of palm leaves? And the prophet and Gabriel said to the prophet, not only am I wearing a skirt made out of palm leaves, all of the angels in heaven are wearing skirts made out of palm leaves in honor of Abu Bakr. Finally, Abu Bakr arrived at the prophet's residence, and the prophet said to him, he welcomed him, he said, it's good to see you. And he said, I have a message for you from our Lord, which was brought by Gabriel. And our Lord says to you, if you are content with our Lord is content with you. And Abu Bakr responded, I am certainly content with my Lord. And he raised his arms and began to whirl. And that's the story of the first Sema, the first whirling. This whirling was taken on, and it is most known to have been taken on by a group called the Mevlevis. The Mevlevis are the tariqat of Jalaluddin Rumi. And many of the various Sufi orders in Turkey whirl. And what is the reason for this whirling? Well, I really understood the reason for the whirling when I was in a mosque in northern Turkey by a group called the Helveti, the Helveti order of Sufism. And in this mosque, there was a downstairs and there was a balcony. And if you walked up into the balcony, there were doors. And all of these doors were about 4 feet, 3 feet or so apart. And there must have been 20 of them that covered the entire balcony. And I asked about them, and it was explained to me as follows. The whirling puts you in a state where you lose your desire, you lose your attachments, you lose your attachment to the mind, and the mind becomes less prominent in you because you have to pay attention to the whirling. You have to pay attention to what you're doing. And in that, you become released from your attachments. And so what were the reasons for the doors? After they whirled, they would then go into each of these little rooms that were attached to each door, which were about 3 feet wide and 6 feet long. And they would begin to pray and meditate on Allah. So whirling was to reduce their attachment to the world so that they could then enter into a stronger meditation, a stronger prayer. This whirling still goes on, and every year there is a celebration of the death date of Rumi, when he said that he in fact was about to change his shirt to go from one phase of existence into the next phase of existence. And they have a demonstration of this whirling. So part of the Sufi practice of the Mevlevi order and many other orders is to whirl. And the point of the whirling is to ground yourself and to create an axis between yourself and the upper world, the non-form world. If you watch what's going on during the whirling, you will see that they have this high hat, which represents a tombstone. So they are leaving this world. They are dying to the world. And you'll also notice that when they whirl, they tilt their head. And the reason for the tilting of the head is to create a connection between themselves and God through the heart without the head being in the way. So it's a direct connection between God and the heart, bypassing the mind. So all of these things have to do with the whirling. Of course, now in some places it's an entertainment, but in truth, it's a methodology to bring about a deeper state of meditation. Okay, Munni?
Wow, so great. There's a question from a young man. His name is Melvin. What are the basic tenets of Sufism?
Well, that's a 3-day question, and that might be a lifetime question. It's a little broad, but I think I've covered a lot of them during the talk today. The basic tenets of Sufism, if I were to capsulize it, is to leave the attachment to the world and to form an attachment to God's qualities, to change our nature from an interaction with the physical to an interaction with the formless, and to understand the state of the formless, which means to take the Asmal Husna and to become the Asmal Husna, to understand compassion and mercy, Rahman and Rahim, to understand truth and justice and forgiveness, and to actually incorporate all of these into our being, and to be able to make that our path and make that our reality. Okay.
Great. Okay, I'm sure all that you spoke about does bring in all those question and answers in many ways.
All
So
right.
this,
I'm getting a little tired.
yes. So would you like to stop here, because there are many questions on the chat too? We could,
All right, let's do a few more and then we'll stop.
yeah. Okay. So this gentleman, all the way from Chittagong, Bangladesh, sends salam to you, Janab Musa, and he wants to know the status of Sufism here, how it is practiced and how it is in our daily life. How do,
Well, you know, we in Philadelphia practice Sufism as taught by Bawa Muhaiyaddeen. And I should explain that everything I know about Sufism is through the grace of Bawa Muhaiyaddeen. Everything that I understand is through the grace of Bawa Muhaiyaddeen. And he taught us to be kind and loving and forgiving and to see no differences among humanity. So this is the life that we attempt to live. This is the life that we attempt to practice. He said to us, become like me. So his example was what we attempt to become. His example is what we attempt to be. We live a life that is based on his life, an attempt to live as he showed us we should live. There are a number of different Sufi groups within the United States. And I think what you're asking is, how prevalent is Sufism in the United States? And it is not that prevalent. There are not that many adherents of Sufism in the United States, but the ones that do exist essentially have a commonality in their purpose, and that commonality is to spread love through humanity.
Musa, you didn't drink any water so far. Are you all right?
I have some water. I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, you do. Yes. This is a very interesting one. If a person has knowledge of all the holy books, does that qualify to make him a Sufi?
Sufism is not just knowledge. Sufism is a state of being, and it's a state of action. So knowledge alone is not enough to cross this path. There has to be a real understanding of bringing that knowledge into action. Action is required for truth to occur.
So there's a question from the floor from Nazneen. What Sufis say about predestined life? Is it there or it's not? Is life predestined?
Bawa told stories about this often. The grace of the Sheikh can improve your existence. And you should try whatever you can to improve your existence. To let things go as if you have no choice and if you're limited leads to you becoming lazy and effort stopping within you. So you have to believe that Allah is there to help you. The Kutubs are there to help you, and you can move forward on this path. You have to believe that. You can't let that go. There is certainly karma involved. There are certainly predestination involved, but there's also a path that is open to you, and effort is involved. Allah loves effort. So all of us have to make effort to become the most that we can be, and we should never give up on this effort.
There are so many questions, but do we have another one?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this question from who? So why do we need a sheikh? Why can't we directly talk to God?
Well, that's a really good question. I think we can probably stop with this one.
Great.
The mind doesn't know the truth. The mind is incapable of knowing God. The mind is elemental. If you just read books, you are going to get yourself into trouble because the mind will lead you astray. Within the first few days I met Bawa, I was sitting in his living room at the time, and there was a fireplace and a mantle. And he said, "What is that?" And everybody said, "That's a fireplace, that's the mantle, that's the wall." And he said, "No, that's a finger, but you're missing the finger for the direction that it's pointing." And this is what the mind does. It takes you and turns you around and is incapable of knowing the truth. The sheikh can redirect your mind to your heart and to bring you into the place that the truth exists. Without a guide, it's a very, very difficult thing to do. Now, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't pray directly to God, but you should also understand the limitations that the mind puts on you and the difficulties that the mind will put you through, and that you need to be able to work with a teacher, and you should find a teacher in your life who can direct you on this path. All of Sufism has teachers. All of Sufism in the tariqats has teachers who take you in that direction. And the teacher is incredibly important. I don't know if I could have made any progress without a teacher. Okay, Munni, thank you. Thank everybody for listening. It's been a wonderful experience to be with all of you. And I hope that the wisdom of Bao Muhaiyaddeen has been able to be transferred somewhat to the people who have been listening.
Musa, thank you from all of us. I'm sure if they could talk to you, they would have just said the same thing. And to the audience, please let me know if you would like to have another session and listen, Musa, as we do often. Let us know. We'll definitely. And Musa, may I really stand up and thank you. Thank you so much. Please. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Munni.
Okay, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Wa alaikum salam, everybody.
Wa alaikum salam. Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we go off now, Munni?
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Salam alaikum, everybody.
Wa alaikum
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Musa.